Yeah, g'day, Heathers and gentlemen. I'm beaming to you live from my machine shop. Before we start, I'd just like to mention that it's an excellent week for the Austrian scientific community, with Professor Zeilinger at the University of Vienna awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics. A wonderful crowning award for an incredible scientist. Now, as you've noticed, the Schaublin progress has been a bit painfully slow lately. Partly due to a vacation, but more due to the setbacks of blowing up a driver, and now the home sensors have also stopped working and need troubleshooting. One reaction to adversity can be resignation, which got me thinking about why we abandon projects. By the way, I was really tempted to just abandon this live stream, so thanks for you guys for sticking with me, and thanks to pointing out that I just stupidly muted my mic with a button which I didn't even know existed. Now don't worry, I'm not going to give up on the Schaublin. On top of my own motivation, the YouTube channel and the awesome community we're building around it put me under enough pressure to see this project through to completion. So why do projects started with great enthusiasm fail? Here were the ideas I came up with. You can probably come up with some additional ideas to this, so please add them to the chat and we can discuss them. I came up with wrong project, lack of money, lack of knowledge, lack of engineering capabilities, lack of discipline, like watching too much YouTube, poor planning, and life's priorities changing. Some projects are doomed from the start. I have the perfect abandoned project here, which has doomed from the start aspects about it, along with most of the others as well. I've added links to the websites below. There's a few things that you might be interested in. Now, back in October 2011, I was living on a third floor inner city apartment with my CNC mini lathe in the corner of the balcony as my only machine tool. Let me just check, make sure this is all working. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Okay, it seems to be working. Thanks, I'll just continue. I bought a Deckel G1L engraver frame from the Scrappy for 20 bucks and used it with a Sherline spindle as my only milling capability. But it was located about an hour away at my friend's place, so I really wanted a little CNC mill for the balcony. I started a CNC Zone thread about it back at the time. It was not going to be a minimalist wood router. I collected ground ball screws, linear rails, DC servo motor system for it. But as noted in the initial thread post, the design was compromised from the start. While I wanted to make an epoxy granite frame with molded iron interface strips for the linear rails, I had no way to mill such a large area, so therefore I settled on an MDF framed machine. As such, I knew when I started that it was not really the machine I wanted to make. I picked MDF as it's somewhat stable, non-directional, and has okay damping properties. Another significant aspect was getting it cut on the big panel saw at the local hardware store, which would be my best chance of getting it reasonably accurate and a rectilinear base. Let me just quickly jump to the comment section, make sure I'm not missing anything. So all good, cold workshop, g'day from UK. Platin21 says, like the project I tried to do and make my mill CNC, I have zero knowledge about servo trimming and when ball screws, and don't even ask about gears, and there's much too much information for me to be digestible. Yeah, that's, I'd agree with that. It's taken me probably 10 years of playing around with CNC to get to a point where I have this level of knowledge, and I'm still really challenged by the whole tuning of the drives and all that sort of stuff. What else we got in there? Yep, lack of discipline, watching too much YouTube. Should be out working on my mill in the garage, but here I am watching YouTube. Thanks, Gorat. I appreciate you coming and joining me, and also sticking around after my initial mess up there. Thanks for coming. So let's get back to it. Yeah, given the jump of about a year in the thread from the initial post to significant progress, lack of discipline accompanied this project from the start. I had to drive about an hour each way for any part which needed milling, so it would have been a good idea to use 3D CAD modeling to make sure everything was well designed and fit perfectly before cutting parts. However, according to the thread post I wrote, I decided more on an iterative, design-as-you-go process. Looking back on that, I'd place that decision squarely in the poor planning category. Now, one aspect of this, which was not a failure, was too little money, because I had been sniping eBay for the parts, so the ball screws are all C3 ground ball screws which came out of IC Fabs in North Korea, or are new like this one. Also, the linear rails are nice, either THK or NSK hardware. The driver model I got for the machine is this. It's a it's called a U-servo. It's a maximum four-channel interface board with, at the moment, only 3 driver channels on it. And it comes from a Hungarian company called CNC Drives. It's been discontinued, but it accepts a step direction input and has encoder feedback. So it's a pretty cute little unit, and I hope it still works after all these years, because yeah, it's been a while. I also picked up some nice Minutia servos for it, DC servos. They're like 24-volt servos. Now, they seemed like they should be a pretty good match for this. I actually bought them twice. The first ones I got were much smaller than this. I guess I guess they look bigger in the YouTube pictures. So once I got them, I figured they probably wouldn't work. Back in those days, I didn't know how to do the inertia calculations for matching drive inertia to load inertia. So I just kind of guesstimated how these looked, whether they'd be a good choice or not. My plan for the user interface module was to copy this design from Brainright, YouTuber Brainright. He basically put this, one of these small little Chinese all-integrated CNC controllers into a pendant, which I thought was a really good idea. Packaging the controller as a pendant gives you a really nice compact solution for a little 3-axis machine like this. Now, these controllers can't do closed loop control, and they also can't coordinate a spindle plus an axis to do like rigid threading, but otherwise it seemed to be a pretty good choice for my little machine here. It's very light and small, so putting it in a pendant was a really nice idea from Brainright, not Braintrust. Yeah, with respect to lack of knowledge, back when I started this project, I didn't have an HF spindle on my radar. I was interested in building my own spindle, so yeah, it seems bizarre to me today that I decided it would be a good idea to base a spindle on the on the Proxon collet system. You know, because really these have pretty crappy concentricity. This was also my first attempt at a spindle design, so it lacks the labyrinth seals that it would need to keep alive for more than a few hours. These are just plastic seals I pressed in. Now, because those servo drives max out at 24-volt DC, I was looking around for a high RPM 24-volt DC motor. The more logical choice to minimize the number of power rails in the system would have still been an collet HF spindle, because you're going to need like household 240-volt power anyway. Or at least going to a brushless DC motor from the RC model industry would have been better. But being pretty ignorant of that electrical stuff, I bought this high-performance brushed DC model aircraft motor from the late 1980s. Now, this motor is also not sealed, so because it's going to likely get aluminium dust in it, so it probably wouldn't last that long. Looking back now, That seemed like a pretty half-assed solution for a spindle and drive, considering I wanted to machine aluminium. I really nickel and dimed that aspect of this project, buying lots of cheap parts, which in some were probably more expensive than the HF spindle plus its associated VFD. But probably the death knell of this project was the big life change that came at the end of 2012 when we bought this house. Spent the next 8 months working every free moment to rip out and replace water pipes, waste pipes, ceilings, floors, bathroom, kitchen, a whole lot of renovation work. And then once we moved in, I had another year or two of pretty major projects lined up, as we couldn't afford to do everything before moving in. By the time I was able to come up for breath from the house renovation work, I'd picked up the Deckel engraver mill and brought that home, and its cast iron frame was obviously more rigid than the MDF one. So I switched plan and thought of doing an epoxy granite head with a 30 taper spindle for that machine. But that's another project which petered out and finally died when I got the Maho. But that'd be a story for another day. Anyway, let's go to the chat room and discuss your inputs. So, what do we got here? Lack of discipline, working, da-da-da. So Platin 21 had the input problem with dimensions, where you put what without blowing up the entire thing. I did some CAD, but would need to model the entire thing, which I don't know, feels a bit redundant. Vertical CAD 2 personal projects. Okay, my mini home workshop. I've built both a manual mini lathe and a manual mini mill with no plans whatsoever. All came out of my head as I went. Would love to go down the CNC path, but it boggles the mind. Yeah, it's challenging. I'm certainly challenged by it. Going down to the more current ones. Darkman asks, what do you do with the parts that were dedicated for the now dead projects and that you can't use outside the project's context? That's a really good question, Darkman. I'll come to that. Platin 21 asks, out of pure craziness, does anyone know a person that does EDM boring for a private person? Probably a difficult finding someone like that, at least in Europe. One of the problems we have is most industrial companies that are working on, this sort of thing are not the slightest bit interested in helping out individuals. So, yeah. Sanu Silvio writes, I've concluded abandoned projects because I'm a hoarder. I have 4 mills, 2 lathes, servo, steppers, drives, spindles, ISO 40 spindles. Yep. As Matthew says, keep them like a farmer. Yeah, exactly. Test Your Design was asked, how do you answer the question, what do you make with all this equipment? Oh, I love that question. The answer to that is always, I just make more parts for the machines. The whole thing about machining as a hobby is it's like this self-enclosed hobby. You buy machines that don't work, use other machines that halfway work to make parts for the machines that don't work, and then make parts for the machines that only halfway work. It's great. No one understands that. Yeah, so to summarize, with respect to this one project, I had a combination of, it was really the wrong project because it largely driven by the lack of capability. I couldn't make the machine I really wanted, so I started a sort of more half-assed machine. There was definitely a lack of knowledge that limited some aspects of this, like the spindle. The lack of discipline shows up in the fact that it took like years where I'd sort of get enthusiastic about it maybe once a year, do another burst for a month or so, and then go off and do something else. Yeah, poor planning. Given that I was in an apartment, I had more free time at that point, it would have made more sense to put more into the planning phase and less into actually implementing half-thought-out things. But really, the major killer of this specific project was simply my change in my life circumstances of getting this house. Now, when you look at projects I've done since starting the YouTube channel, I actually have a bit of an improvement in my self-discipline. I'm better at largely sticking to one project until completion. Now, obviously, making videos and editing them seriously slows down the project progress in general. You know, I'm putting a lot of time into the YouTube, which is time away from the actual machine project. Although by forcing me to stick to one project for, you know, up to a year or a year and a half at a time, it definitely has improved the chances of any specific project actually getting finished. However, at this time, it's getting to the point I really need to do a burst of small catch-up projects, and especially maintenance projects, once the Schaublin is actually usable. Lack of capability is not so much of a limitation for me now. Between the Bolly lathe and soon-to-be Schaublin, plus the Maho mill, I can mostly do parts I need, and I've got friends with bigger machines if necessary. I'm also getting better at investing up front what a project really costs, rather than nickel and diming a bunch of half-usable solutions. On the Schaublin, I really did try to buy decent hardware up front, rather than sort of buying, you know, unmatched motors and drivers and stuff through eBay. On the poor planning front, now, although my 3D printer is there and it's brilliant for prototyping parts before committing to a final design, I am finding the switch to FreeCAD, it's unintuitive enough that it cramps my creativity and design a bit. I'd love to go back to my student version of CATIA or to use Onshape, but since I commercialized this YouTube channel, that's not really feasible. I guess I just need to knuckle down and use FreeCAD more and master it. I do keep trying to learn new stuff to combat the lack of knowledge thing, but I kind of fear that age is starting to shrink my brain, so I forget stuff and learn slower. Hopefully that's just an excuse, huh? Now to that question, what about this MDF mill? Well, I'm really not sure what'll happen to it. I've put enough work into the frame that I do not want to scrap it till I'm sure it will never be used. The hardware I got's really nice gear. Now I may recycle this stuff into a little benchtop surface grinder, or maybe an engraver. An engraver would be easier because it means I can just finish it as it's currently designed. Although I do still have a pretty strong desire to make some sort of epoxy granite framed machine. But don't hold your breath though. There are a lot of smaller projects I want to do once I eventually finish the Schaublin. And as I covered in one of my live streams available to the Patreons and members, I'd really love to make a replica of the little Retrup 3-cylinder radial motorcycle engine as my next major project. Anyway, let's just pop back to the chat. Gorak, I just spent most of the afternoon at the neighbour's shop turning down wheels for machine skates so I can move the machine to a place in the garage where I can put the Z-axis back in. Yeah, good on you, Zork. I look forward to seeing your machine finished there. Dan Nappart says, I spent thousands on my first CNC project in an attempt to save money buying cheap components. In the end, I had to buy quality components anyway. Yeah, that's, if you look back at the video I did on the Maho, that was kind of the machine where I learnt this, because I had these plans to modify a Chinese Rongfu 7048 machine and CNC it. And when I really analyzed the design, I came to the point that the only things I were going to keep were 3 or 4 castings and basically replace absolutely everything else in that machine. Now, if that's the case, by the time you buy quality ball screws, quality drives, and all the other stuff that you need for it, you end up, and even just the price of wire really adds up. Wire, sensors, and all this other stuff. I could see it's actually cheaper to buy a good CNC machine that hasn't been used too much, that died of some sort of electrical failure, because you get all of that hardware basically for free, and it was all as engineered to work perfectly. So that was kind of that was the point where I sort of stopped looking at retrofitting, cheaper machines, and just bite the bullet, see if you can find a kind of a damaged CNC machine up front, an electrically damaged CNC machine up front, and just go for it. Giovanni asks, are you using the Real Thunder branch of FreeCAD? I'm not. I guess I should. That's because, I have read that it's there. I am kind of hesitant of whenever you have to start building up things, branches and this sort of stuff. I'm not that good at the software that I find that sort of thing that easy or intuitive. But yeah, that's something I should probably look into. 3D Kiwi wrote, "Kia ora, mate. I'm stuck in analysis paralysis at the moment with a router, a mill, a CO2 laser, and several 3D printers, not to mention cars." Yeah, that's where I was at as well. I also went through a phase of like jumping from project to project, starting one, getting excited, starting the next one. That's what I'm really trying not to do now. It's like there's so many projects that I would like to start, continue on with, or finish hidden in corners around my head and around my workshop, but I'm really trying not to. I'm really trying to just stick with the Schaublin, finish the Schaublin. There's always a few things that come up due to other people's birthdays and stuff where I have to jump off this project, but I really don't want to jump from, to the next shiny object every time, because I know that if I do that, I never get back to it. And one thing I sort of picked up from the home-built aircraft world is put your hands on your project every single day. Every day, go down, take a look at it. Even if you don't actually get anything done, you just go down, you're going, okay, where did I leave it? What's my next step? Okay, I need to do this bit of wiring. Just the fact that you start thinking through in your head of, okay, what do I need for that? Do I have all the parts? What am I going to do? That alone keeps you mentally in the project. As soon as you miss a day, you can miss 2 days, you can miss a week. You miss a week, you can miss a month. And once you've missed a month, projects are really on that slide down towards abandonment. At least in my world, that's sort of what happens to me. Yeah. So, Mr. Green's Workshop, totally agree with you about buying machines and upgrading them. I made my 3D printer on a 3-axis robot. Wow. Matthew Barry had has the input of make lists and date them. Yeah, that's a good point. I've actually got a whiteboard on the wall now, and that's something I need to start populating with a list of all of the projects. As I think of them, I'm starting to add things, and there's a lot of things already on there, and it's, a lot more to go. Yeah, Sanu Silvio, just adding one wire a day or bolt makes you continue and finish the project. Absolutely, I agree with that totally. So Johnny Lemmy says, yes, we did that with a CNC router. Got it working, but still haven't finished it 2 years later. Yeah, that's something that came up when I did this live stream with the Patreons, that another one of the killers can be, once it works, or once I know, there's two things really there. Once it works, I never bother finishing it. Not something that's something I was really happy with the Maho, that I went on and finished the actual user control module. It would have been easy once it was working with just a computer monitor and a keyboard and a mouse to just keep going with those, but that's the same with the Schaublin. I really want to finish it with a proper integrated machine interface module rather than just leave it and work it with a keyboard and mouse. The second thing is, and this is a thing which came up in the other time I did this live stream, was one of my real weaknesses is I get all enthusiastic about something, especially new knowledge, but once I understand it, I lose interest and move on to something else. And understanding is not really the full thing of knowledge. You really need to take an understanding, practice it, implement it, and really make it, a permanent part of your knowledge base rather than just, I understood this once. But losing interest in projects because, okay, now I know how it works, that's definitely something that comes up for me. Bernhard Leuven, how do you balance work and home life? Well, I got kind of lucky that a few years ago, my office moved to a temporary building, which was like 7 minutes on a bicycle from my house. So I kind of rescued all the time from commuting then. Then COVID hit, and so we were having to work from home office. That again helped, because it certainly is a big benefit to just be able to go out of your office, walk down 2 flights of stairs and be in your project room. That's a big help. Second thing that really helped was the kids growing up and basically leaving home. I mean, yeah, when the kids were young, there was no chance to get any of this sort of stuff done. Yeah, that's I guess the main thing is that's really helped me is I started this channel at roughly the same time that COVID hit, and initially there was, you know, you working home office and could easily just commute up and down. You weren't losing any time sitting in a car anywhere, and I still work two days a week from home, and can so if I finish work at 5, you know, I'm in the workshop at 5:02, saves a lot of time. Okay, I think I've pretty much done with everything I wanted to say here. So this was a taste of the live streams that I do roughly once per month with Patreons and YouTube members. If it's something that you would enjoy, there are links to join those below, and I'd love to see you in that community. And yeah, thanks very much for your support. Thanks for watching my videos, and have a really good Sunday.